Hey folks, I am back and check this out. We are going to take a look at two knives that I just picked up and just my thoughts on how to value them and how I study their history. It's kind of neat. Right here we have a Colonial Province USA stainless. This is made in Rhode Island. This one's stamped just USA. It's obviously a Coca-Cola knife. And the first thing I do is I look at the condition of the knife and I look at the construction of the knife. Both these are stamped production, meaning, well, today it would be an extremely inexpensive knife to manufacture. But the neat thing about the older knives, a lot of them that were stamped production or have, for instance, the hollow bolsters, and it's almost completely machine made. They're actually really well made, especially this one. This is a Colonial. A lot of their knives are stamp production, and you can kind of see how it's really thin here, but they're really manufactured nice. This particular knife I'm a real fan of. I have about 4 of these. They're really made nice, and the plastic handles feel really solid, and it just feels really hefty in your hand. But there is no finishing at all to this knife. But it actually feels a lot higher quality than a lot of today's knives that are actually finished by hand. Just an older knife. The dating on this is from 1938 to present. I would probably put this somewhere in the 70s or the 80s. Okay. Coca-Cola advertising knives, real interesting history on those. These particular knives were manufactured in the 30s. You'll see sometimes they'll say the World Fair or whatever. But Jim Parker, he had a lot of these manufactured in the 80s. So do you have an old one, or do you have one that was manufactured in the 80s? Well, in the 80s, that's still, I mean, that's a good 40 years ago. So any way you look at it, it's an older knife. But this one, I believe, this was made in the 80s. How I can tell is, you really can't tell. I mean, they're both stamped USA. They're both manufactured really nice. You can hear that snap. This is stamp production. It has a half stop, and it really clicks in nice. It's manufactured really nice. It's a nice knife. But then again, if you looked at it, it's stamp production. You can kind of see how it's just completely made by machine, not finished by hands. You got a gap here. The older ones were made of celluloid, and the cell tends to really shrink up on you. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not a real expert on the advertising knives, but that's just from the research that I've done. And what books do I use for research? I use my Levin's Guide to Knives. I saved a few spots for you guys, kind of interesting. Colonial Knife Company and Colonial Cutlery Company. The average value of their knives is in the low value. Dating is from 1926 to present. They started off in Rhode Island, so that's pretty cool. You know, Rhode Island. Rhode Island doesn't produce much of anything anymore, and we all know why. Their policies are really not business friendly. Just because a knife company produces low quality or low value knives doesn't mean that they're bad at all. Here's some Coca-Cola knives, and this kind of demonstrates what the older ones would look like. Drink Coca-Cola in bottles. A lot of them were stamped with the company that made them, like Camillus. You have Camco. You have Germany that made them. The values for those are in the $75 to $125, all the way up to $175 in value. You can see the cell that they use. It almost looks like pearl. I have a few of those knives. I'm not going to bust out all my knives. It'd be kind of cool if I did compare them, but let's keep the video simple looking at these two. I also have my Goins Encyclopedia of Cutlery Markings, and you come into here and you can kind of look at what it's stamped with. The closest one I saw was Colonial Province, Rhode Island, RI. Straight marking, and you have the curved marking, which would be a curved marking would be kind of like a round marking, and it'd be from 1926 to 1938. Well, this stamp on this particular knife, for instance, says Colonial Province USA stainless. Every marking, including the marking U.S.A. has significance, because as a company has changed, for instance, maybe the USA had no dots in between it from this period to this period. And from this period to this period, you might have USA with the dots in there. The simple fact of possibly a curved stamp or a straight stamp will give you the dating on a particular knife. And it really impacts the significance and the value of what your knife is. The closest one I could find in this one is Colonial Province RI, and it's a straight marking from 1926 to 1938. But unlike many colonial knives, the knife seen with this marking was very well built. You also have a Colonial Province RI, Rhode Island, which is 1938 to present. This marking was found on a knife with shell-handled construction. Colonial Knife Company, New York, 1926 to present. So you have different types. It's really hard to tell to date this particular knife. If I really got into it, you can maybe find something on the internet. But then again, on the internet, you're looking at other people's opinions. The only way you could really date every knife specifically is just, you really got to look into the construction, the types of machines they had at the time, and you know, this I would probably date this. It could be, I'm thinking probably in the 80s. That's just my guess. It's really well constructed though, just beautiful. But then again, it is stamp production. No half stops on these. Got a nice snap to it. And then this blade is stamp patent, and it has 3,317,996 on it. I could look up that patent, and it would possibly talk about how this knife was manufactured, and that's something else I could do to investigate this knife. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Just some real interesting stuff and how I look at knives and think about knives and value the knives. And that's about it. Y'all take it easy. Take care.